This episode is brought to you by Goals.com, the sales performance platform built to help teams stay focused, motivated, and on track. While most CRMs just track data, Goals.com drives real results. It's simple, affordable, and designed to help your sales team hit targets faster, without the headache of complex setup or costly consultants. Whether you're using a CRM or not, Goals.com works seamlessly to elevate your performance. Book a fun, fast demo today at Goals.com.
All right, welcome back to the Goals.com podcast, where we dig into what really drives top-tier sales performance. Today's guest is someone who's not just launching products, she's launching revolutions in healthcare. From training surgeons to scaling startups, Suzanne Van Widvey is a true force in medtech sales and strategy. Get ready for a masterclass in leadership, innovation, and making an impact where it matters most. Suzanne, ready to dive in?
I am. Thank you, Andrew, for that kind introduction.
You've helped launch several breakthrough medical technologies. What drew you to this space and what keeps you motivated after more than 20 years?
Well, I've always been attracted to medicine. I wasn't the person that wanted to go to medical school and spend the 8 years plus after you graduate, but I always had a passion for it, and purpose-driven work has always been a thing for me. I started in the hospital as a grant writer. Worked with really brilliant MDs and PhDs while I was a grant writer, and it hooked me from that point forward.
Looking back, what was one of the most pivotal moments in your career where everything changed for you as a leader or strategist?
I think it was when I went to work for my first med device company, and that was CR Bard back in the day. Incredible leaders, incredible salespeople, and I was fresh out of a job where I wasn't in sales, so I was incredibly coachable, and people loved that. So I was mentored by some great peers, leadership, senior leadership, C-level leadership that gave me advisory board opportunities, gave me a chance to revamp their training program, just all sorts of opportunities. And I think that just changed how I saw myself, not just as a salesperson, but as a part of their whole organization.
You've worked with both startups and large organizations. How does your approach to sales and commercialization shift between the two?
Well, with startups, it's really scrappy, right? It's very hands-on. You're wearing multiple hats. You're replacing parts while you're flying the plane because there's not enough gas oftentimes to land the plane until your next funding round,
I
to
hear
be
you.
metaphorical. In large organizations, it's more about structure. There's a chain of command, and that matters more. The infrastructure is typically in place and proven. But you still have to align in both instances with goals of the stakeholders, and you keep having to document and scale so that your product can be developed. And then oftentimes there's, even in a big organization, there's new products coming on board or being developed at that time. So there is a little bit of the startup even within a big organization when you're bringing on new technology.
Makes sense. You've developed multiple sales training programs. What makes a sales training program truly stick and drive measurable results?
In short, I would say, besides the process, which is the whole crux of a training manual and playbooks, but it's the wraparound process in my opinion. And in medical sales, a medical device specifically, it's really clinical acumen. So you have to be able to teach people to have a clinical conversation based on data. And that is a different type of conversation. And it involves not only being a good salesperson with good listening skills, but really being able to parse out a white paper or 6 or 7 of them, depending on how many you have or how many products you have.
When training surgeons and sales reps, how do you bridge the gap between clinical knowledge and sales effectiveness?
For me, I always remember that in the end of a medical sale, there's always a patient who's going to be impacted by my device and by my advice. So my rule is to keep the conversations clinical, which means I have to know my device, my data. I have to know my competitors' devices, my competitors' data, And the bottom line is I'm always willing to walk away at the end of the day if my product is not clinically efficacious for this patient. I personally feel like that's what has allowed me longevity in my craft, because that has made me more of a trusted consultant and advisor, because I will walk away and they'll know that I'm not, even after a 4-hour drive, there just for the sale. I'm there for the patient. I'm there for them to be their wingman.
What's the most common mistake you see sales reps make in the healthcare or medical space, and how do you coach them through it?
I think it's a common mistake in any kind of sales process. It's, we know our features and benefits, we know our value prop, and we're so wired around that. But we do that before the problem's actually diagnosed. And I just coach that you need to often, instead of showing up to educate, show up to understand. And when training sales reps, I always coach them, and I coach myself when I go into a sales situation, to stay curious, to lead with a clinical person's pain points, look at their workflow constraints, their decision triggers. I want to know who's involved in the process, who has to be involved. Today, all sales in medical device especially is really, really complex. There's not only the physicians, there's their staff to be considered, there's value analysis committees, and not only that, but at the C level too, now I think it's all integrated. You really have to understand what their annual initiatives are. Procurement also has their own initiatives. They're sometimes running evaluations, or they just closed an evaluation with your product. So you really have to be sensitive and have conversations cross-functionally.
Just kind of touched on this, but digging in a little deeper, commercializing a new medical device is complex. How do you approach aligning cross-functional teams for a successful product launch?
Yeah, and that's similar. I think it's a similar skill, but it's different. I I start by identifying. I just had to do this in a recent role. Each person's like their goals. So I sit down with them either in a room or in a Zoom. I listen to truly understand their goal, just like with a customer, and how their individual work is measured. All our work should be overall measured right, but it's not always the case, I've learned. So at that point, typically, I'm the one that builds the roadmap. So in the roles I've had in the consultancies I'm doing currently, I then build a roadmap that clearly defines the why behind all of this. And then keeping those metrics aligned between all the different divisions and what matters to the stakeholders. So regular communication is really, really critical. Project management worksheets is something I go over and above for transparency. So everyone's seeing each other's work. And that way we know, are we holding someone else's work up if we're not finishing something? It just makes it more transparent.
When you step into a new commercialization strategy role, what are the first three things you assess to drive performance fast?
Well, I've learned in startups, how long of a runway do we have? How many months of funding do we have? And then understanding this and confirming that there is a runway that we work with. You look at the budgets, everything else, the basics. But I first and foremost, when I go into it, look at the voice of the customer. So I interview customers, what's being said really on the ground about our product. And those interviews are tricky because customers oftentimes don't want to tell you everything that's maybe potentially wrong with your product. But if you go in with, again, this curiosity and this allowing them to help you grow, and it's clearly communicated that you're looking for good, you're looking for how we can improve, and you're maybe looking for wish lists, they're more willing to open up. So I think that's really, really important. And then I'm very data driven. So again, I look at metrics and things like that. I go to a next level too, and I want to make sure that the leadership team tells me that yes, this aligns with their goals and that we're all on the same page, but also the board. And you don't always get access to the board beforehand, but if you can, or if somehow the CEO is willing to make sure that he's on board with what everyone has just said in all those meetings, because the stakeholders are the ones that are really driving the conversations quarterly, monthly, potentially.
Yeah. You've supported clinical trials from the commercial side. How important is that bridge between clinical execution and market readiness?
Yeah, it's critical. Clinical trials they're about regulatory endpoints, but they're not just about that. They're the foundation for your commercial story. So setting up the right documentation process to gather the correct insights on usability, outcomes, but also adoption barriers as they translate into those marketing stories and narratives, the training tools, field enablement, adding that layer speeds product adoption post-launch. And so it's really, really critical to have both aspects in that.
Sales can be emotionally and mentally demanding. How do you coach sales leaders to stay resilient and focused in tough markets?
It's not every day is a different day. I even tell myself, again, I coach myself the same way I coach others, is focus on the controllables. Um, be prepared, really put the effort in. But a lot of it is mindset and really just, it's like a sport. I'm a former athlete and I was always taught, see the swim, be the swim. And so it's no different in sales and in life. You just really have to take that time, that quiet time in the morning and then in evening to, I think, evaluate your day, but keeping your vision clear of what you want and how the conversation's going to go. But that doesn't come without the work too, right? So you have to put in the work.
You've won awards, led teams, launched products. What's one personal habit or mindset that has helped you sustain high performance?
I've really prided myself in really understanding my business, but also understanding my competitors. So doing the SWOT analysis is, oftentimes they're done for me before I walk in. The company's done that in their due diligence, but really knowing my craft, and that gives me the confidence, and people sniff that out. If you don't know your product, people know it. And they see it in your confidence level. But really mindset, again, I would go back and saying that mindset is important. In the very, very end, people only really remember how you make them feel when you're gone, right after you leave. So my superpower is actually connecting with people, genuinely wanting the best for them, wanting a win-win solution. And sometimes that just means they don't want your product or they're not ready for your product now, but maybe they're ready in 3 months or 6 months. And I really try to get to the bottom of that. Are they an early adopter? Are they a late adopter? And I have those conversations so that they're okay with saying no, but then I get that second opportunity. I'm not just shut out.
It's great insight. You're passionate is about improving patient outcomes and lowering healthcare costs. How do you align sales messaging with that bigger mission?
Again, I always start from the patient's point of view and work backwards. So I think every sales conversation in medical sales is a chance to connect that clinical value back into the message. So I'm really careful too, which I think is important, of choosing the right products. So reducing readmissions is a big thing now on the market for hospitals, really trying to reduce the costs. Insurance companies are in a situation right now, right, where they're raising their rates and everything else. And part of it is hospital readmissions are high. And so finding services or products that can do that, shortening procedures so that patients can go home sooner or don't have as much of a chance to go back into the hospital. And then really, I think now there's just so many amazing diagnostics that are pre-diagnostic. And sometimes that's hard to get a code for, to get it paid for. But I do think it's in our future where that will come, and that will be a part of the whole patient journey, is that there will be things that are on the market, like facial recognition scans, like a peripheral arterial disease, indicator for that before they have to go and get their ancobrachial index, things to that nature.
Oh, I don't doubt it. How do you define impact when it comes to your work, and how do you know when you're making a difference beyond the numbers?
I choose my projects very carefully. So the company has to have my same values. The products have, for me, to be preventative in nature. And I also, just like I hire on values, I also work with leaders who have my same values. And in short, what that means for me is they I want them to really truly want to make a difference and not just be about the bottom line. Obviously, there's revenue goals and all those things, and that's part of business and that's the fun of it. But I really want to make sure that I'm aligning with people that when we're doing the work, that makes it meaningful. you can be aligned there.
Sure. If you could give one piece of advice to a sales leader bringing a breakthrough product to market, what would it be?
Get obsessed with clarity, like a clear message. Your team, your customers, your partners, they all need to be crystal clear on the why. Not to sound like Simon Sinek, but I am a fan of him. And the why matters. Basically, you want to make sure that you're not making it so complicated to explain your product. Simplicity is something that's really, really important in medical sales. Sometimes the conversations are in an elevator, in between cases, at a scrub sink, when they're in between patients. So typically you only have 30 seconds, if you're lucky, maybe a minute, to convey your topic or your conversation or whatever you're doing to intro your product. And as we know, people are really preoccupied by their own stuff. And so we have to remember that we're an interruption to that. And even we're an interruption with our product to their process. They have a routine and they have built a cadence with the products they use and the things they do and the systems they have in place, services, etc. So I always just remember that when I go in, and I try to keep my message very simple. And oftentimes that just means breaking my sales calls down into parts. So I may go for the first time with the first part of my message to get their attention and get there. With all the noise, I would say too that it takes double the touches than it used to because there's just so much static out there. So to get them
I
to
can
dial
relate.
into your message is just harder and harder these days.
Absolutely. I think that's true across the board.
Yeah.
What's one lesson you wish more people understood about the intersection of clinical and commercial strategy in medtech?
From all levels of the organization, including stakeholders, I truly believe that commercial success depends on clinical credibility. Some companies are great at building these amazing concepts in science off of great concepts, but there's not enough data to get the sale across to a physician who is very, very, very data driven. So having a lot of clinical support, even case studies can do those in certain circumstances, depending on the complexity of the product or, emergent it is, where it is it pre-diagnostic versus an implant? But just really making sure that you have not only that concept documented, but you have clinical actual data.
What's one lesson you wish more people understood about the intersection of clinical and commercial strategy in medtech?
For me, commercial success depends on the clinical credibility and vice versa. So at all levels, like from the very beginning where they're collecting the data to the end, it's just really important that the devices, the concepts, etc., it depends on where it is in the scale. If it's like pre-diagnostic or if it's an implant, right? There's more data needed sometimes towards the end of that, but just having the data that's needed, not just proof of concept. And so some people, they stop short of getting really good data. And that's what physicians, surgeons especially, want to see when you're having a conversation. If you're selling something that's a service, they want to see case studies, but they actually want to see the data from the case studies, not just the slide. Just making sure that that is done properly. And that starts all the way from how they're documenting their procedures through the quality system and through to the clinical trials. And like going back to how you're asking the questions, what questions you're asking, making sure that people need the product at the time that we're selling it.
All right, Suzanne, I think we will wrap up today's episode right there. We want to thank you for providing us with insights on sales leadership and strategy. If you're in sales, med tech, or just looking to level up your impact, there's a ton to take away from today's episode. And to our listeners, stay focused, stay driven, and we'll see you next time on the Goals.com podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Goals.com, the sales performance platform built to help teams stay focused, motivated, and on track. While most CRMs just track data, Goals.com drives real results. It's simple, affordable, and designed to help your sales team hit targets faster, without the headache of complex setup or costly consultants. Whether you're using a CRM or not, Goals.com works seamlessly to elevate your performance. Book a fun, fast demo today at Goals.com.
Thank you so much, Andrew.